Of Q broadcast, it's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Starz. And the best part, there are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
We live in a world where men are told it's harmless. It's just entertainment. Let's stop lying to ourselves. Pornography destroys. It weakens your spirit. It dulls your drive. And it robs you of what real intimacy is supposed to be. Every click is a step away from the man you're supposed to be. We can't call ourselves leaders if we are slaves to a screen.
As someone that is prior service, I know all about discipline. And discipline isn't out there, it's within your mind. Porn rewires your brain, weakens your will, wrecks all of your relationships. It doesn't just stay on a screen, it invades your marriage, your confidence, and your actual purpose. As men, if we don't learn to discipline ourselves, we'll be ruled by our impulses. Now, it is time to stand up and take control before this silent war takes more than you're willing to lose.
Real men don't hide in the shadows of shame. We step up and we protect what's ours. We fight for our wives and kids, our own hearts. Twitter isn't just an app, it's a weapon. It's a tool used to break free and start living like the man that you're meant to be. The battle's here and it starts with you. You can stop living in shame and you can break free today.
Of Q Broadcast, it's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q.
Here at the Anomic Age, we know that these times of uncertainty are stressful. It is incumbent upon all of us to put our fears first and bow down to government tyranny. Gone are the days of freely leaving your home, working, and social interactions. In exchange for safety, we will trade liberty. At the Anomic Age, we understand. However, just in case you want to get off your knees and stop being a sniveling coward, check out the John Age Project at anomicage.com.
Meet Ann Morrissey, who is here with her daughter, Dareth. Dareth is 17 years old. Mrs. Morrissey, I don't have to tell you that most parents would be extremely depressed if their daughter came home one day looking like this. I assume that was your response: shock, anger, depression? What was it?
I was extremely angry. I really went bananas.
Yeah, how old was she when this happened?
Possibly 13, 14 years old.
We're talking like it's a disease, and
Well,
yeah. How did she explain it to you, Mrs. Morrissey?
there was very poor communication until we went into counseling. And it almost broke up our family. But through counseling and Serena, I can understand it better.
What do you understand?
That she feels like she doesn't want to be like everyone else, and she wants to be her own person. And through the dress code and her lifestyle, she's expressing this. It doesn't conform with our rules, but we're learning to cope, and it's a very, very difficult thing. Extremely difficult.
Dareth, let's let you talk for yourself. You're from Long Beach, California.
I just can't handle being like everybody else because that's what everybody else wants, you know. Just because somebody else does something does not mean that I have to do it. You know, I have my own morals and ideals, and I go by them.
Are you drug-free, Dareth?
Yes, I am.
Is this a political statement then? Is it? Do you have some misgiving about the society that you see?
Yeah, there's a lot of problems, you know. A lot of the people are really aware of what's going on, you know, and I don't like it, you know. There's a lot of problems.
What?
I don't like the way society is based.
What bothers you? Give us some of the misgivings you have.
The rich, the poor, the people starving, the wars, you know. Why can't, you know, everybody just get along and just live their life?
Fallon, Real and Chevy.
Propagating truth in a world of lies. You are listening to the John H. Project.
Trust no one. Trust no one. Trust no one.
You found it. You're here. You are headlong down the runaway train that is the Anomic Age. I'm your host, John H. Thanks for being with us today on the program. We got Joel Gilbert coming up to talk about his most recent film, The Trayvon Hoax. But before we get into that, check out anomicage.com. Share the link, friends, family, loved ones, and enemies. Most important part, if you are so inclined, paypal.me/anomicage. You can become a donator, a contributor, or just someone who likes and wants to help out a little bit with the show. Also, you can go to patreon.com/anomicage and make it a regular thing. Become a patron. Highly encourage that. Need all the help I can get as far as paying for all the bills around here and keeping this thing going. So if you're so inclined, check out anomicage.com. You can find all those links to become a patron, to donate, to contribute, and so forth. And for you, you can also get all the shows, all the video, all the audio. Download the iPhone app, the Android app, sign up for the newsletter, all that and so much more for absolutely nothing. So, enough of that. Hold on to your hats for just a mere matter of seconds. We'll be joined by our guest on the other side. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Joel Gilbert into the Anomic Age today. Joel is an American filmmaker based in Los Angeles and president of Highway 61 Entertainment. He is known for political documentaries on Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Islamism, as well as music history films on Bob Dylan and comedies featuring Paul McCartney and Elvis Presley. Thanks so much, Joel, for being with us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Well, I watched your most recent one, I suppose, on the Trayvon hoax just a few nights ago, and it was so compelling. I sort of almost kind of lost the severity or seriousness of it because it was such a whodunit. I was looking at it kind of like an Agatha Christie novel because there were so many players in the game.
Right.
I think the average person that follow this at the time is probably just looking at Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. But as your film really gets into, there's so many more players in this drama, so to speak.
Right. Well, the Trayvon hoax came out about 1.5 years ago. And in that film, I show how it really was the turning point in American history. It's really where liberals stopped being liberals and became progressives. It's where the justice system got completely intimidated by lynch mobs. And it kind of was where all this kind of modern era of racial division started. And what I did in looking at that case, and you can go to see the trailer and look at get a link to buy the book. There's a book version and a film version at thetrayvonhoax.com. And what I did is I showed that the key witness in that case, named Rachel Jeantel, people remember her. She was the plus-sized Haitian American girl that claimed to be Trayvon's girlfriend and was on the phone with him and heard everything. It turns out she was a fake witness. She was not his girlfriend. She wasn't on the phone with him. And I found the real girlfriend, the real girl that really was on the phone with him, and she's in the movie, named Diamond Eugene, and 16 years old at the time. And I showed how after Zimmerman was exonerated, people forget he was exonerated by the Sanford Police Department, who said that it was self-defense based on eyewitnesses, 911 calls, and based on physical evidence. And only after that report came out, Benjamin Crump shows up with Al Sharpton, and he says, I called up to New York City and got Al Sharpton to come down because he has a track record. Well, Al Sharpton's track record, of course, was race hoaxes, the Tawana Brawley race hoax, Freddie's Fashion Mart massacre, Crown Heights, anti-Semitic violence, all incited by Al Sharpton. So that's who Crump brought down. And this tag team, he comes up with a recording, does Crump, and he says, I just talked to this girl on the phone last night. He plays a couple excerpts. Her name is Diamond Eugene. She's 16 years old. This is Trayvon's girlfriend. They're in love. And that's what caused Obama to get involved. He said, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And it really became for political purposes because the black vote was not in the tank for Obama in 2012 with the upcoming presidential election. Everything had gotten worse. 40-50% unemployment in urban America, illegals coming in, flooding the cities, taking jobs, driving down wages. So they used this to really inflame black voters for political purposes. And they sent the state of Florida, appointed a special prosecutor. They went down to Miami to interview 16-year-old Diamond Eugene, and 18-year-old Rachel Jeantel shows up. And she says, I lied about my name. I lied about my age. And I did all the investigation. I got Trayvon's 750-page cell phone records, and I showed that the real girlfriend, that's the book and the film you can see right there, the real girlfriend was Diamond Eugene. I found her studying criminal justice, of all things, at Florida State University, and she's in the movie. And I exposed how the Black Lives Matter movement was really based on this entire event, that they didn't agree with the verdict. And you can see where this thing has gone, because it started with Trayvon's parents saying, we just want an arrest. We only want an arrest, that's all. Let the justice system take over. Now, you can't really arrest someone without probable cause. And they got the probable cause by having this Rachel Jeantel pretend to have been on the phone with Trayvon and heard things that were opposite of the eyewitnesses, which they shouldn't have used anyway. And then, of course, when the verdict again exonerated Zimmerman, like the police report, the Ben Crump and the Martin family and Black Lives Matter said, there's no justice, no peace. Well, the system worked, but it didn't work because they used a fake witness, but it wasn't acceptable. So that's where the mob rule really started. In Ferguson, Missouri, it continued. We've seen it all the way through the George Floyd case. Now the Departments of Justice will simply indict someone within 24 hours, as was Derek Chauvin. The trial's going on right now in the George Floyd case. You're not supposed to indict someone until you investigate them. Same thing, the Rashard Brooks case in Atlanta, where the police officer was shot at with a taser and fired back, and he died. They simply charged him with murder within 24 hours with no investigation. And in the George Floyd case, even though he was arrested and everybody was charged with murder, including the other police officers who were standing around, the mob still wasn't satisfied, and they went and rioted all over the country for months. And to this day, Ben Crump yesterday out in front of the courthouse in the George Floyd trial saying no justice, no peace, to intimidate the jury. And what happens in these cases is a year later, we find out that a lot of the facts that we were told aren't true. Just like the Breonna Taylor case, we were told in Louisville, we were told that she was sleeping in her bed and the cops busted in and shot her to death. None of that was true. And we find out a year later, well, maybe we shouldn't have had all these riots and all this unrest, because it was to say that the initial thing was racism wasn't true. And the facts of what really happened aren't true either. So that's the tragedy of all this, is this mob, lynch mob, that says this incident is definitely racist and we want blood now. And the system goes along with it, unfortunately.
That's one thing I found so disturbing. And I guess I've said this many times on the show. We used to have we had the three branches of government and two of them were compromised. Now we've got all three. But I guess the easiest overarching question here is, how the heck was this allowed to happen? You did this investigative work.
Right.
Where were the prosecutors, the defense attorneys, the police, just people doing the ground ball, vetting out witnesses and investigating this? How the heck was this allowed to?
Look, once it became politicized, the Department of Justice, Eric Holder, got involved in the Trayvon Martin case and the investigation. And once it was political, the other people pretty much felt powerless. The state of Florida went along with it, even though they knew that Rachel Jeantel was not on the phone with him. I had a police officer, Sanford Police, emailed me, saw my film, and he said, we knew Rachel Jeantel was not Trayvon's girlfriend, but we couldn't do anything about it because the case had already been taken over. So it does make your head spin. My head is still spinning. We look back and you see Rachel Jeantel. Remember, she couldn't read her own handwriting. She was a year older than Trayvon. She was 150 pounds heavier. And the text messages revealed this highly sexual relationship. And she could barely put two sentences together. So I just went in the state of Florida archives and I got Trayvon's phone records from his cell phone extraction. And he's texting photos back and forth with Diamond Eugene. He says, send me a pic. She texts the picture. He says, you got the pic? Yeah, I got the pic. There's the picture. It's not Rachel Jeantel. It's a sexy girl, 150 pounds lighter than Rachel Jeantel. And it's just not her. So I don't know how they missed this. I did talk to the defense attorneys, Mark O'Mara and Don West. Look, they told me they spent 2/3 of their time in court in the year before the trial just trying to force the prosecution to give them evidence they had a right to have, including these phone records were withheld till just before the trial, including the name of Rachel Jeantel was withheld till just before the trial. So they told me that they knew they could get Zimmerman off on self-defense, and they were just kind of happy that Rachel seemed to be such a terrible witness, and they didn't have the resources as pro bono attorneys to really go down that road. It took me several months going through 3,000 text messages, 3,000 photos, going through Twitter and Facebook to figure out who's who and all the relationships. And I put the story of the Trayvon hoax together, and I bring you along the journey with me, how I investigated, and I go to Florida and I get all the archives and I put the whole thing together. So it is a very, I think it's a great whodunit movie, but it does unfortunately signify where the judicial system was corrupted by the media in partnership with their allies in the Democrat Party.
I mean, this might be just wild speculation, but it seems to me like, you nailed it. It seems like once Obama's White House, a la Eric Holder, took over, all bets were off as far as getting a fair trial. I don't know what a fair trial would even look like, because it was all sort of played out in the media before it even went to trial. Yeah, look, Zimmerman got a fair trial, but the problem is that he became part of a political agenda. So did Trayvon Martin. He was used. Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin have a lot in common. They were both used by the media and the Democrats for a political agenda. George Zimmerman did them no good in jail. They knew he was going to get acquitted, and only out on the street they could say no justice, no peace, and we have to change the system. The Black Lives Matter said they were formed because of the acquittal of Zimmerman.
but you never hear a peep from them about, 10 black kids getting shot or 10 killed in Chicago on any given weekend. You never hear a word. They just take these very, very rare incidences of maybe police excessive force or misunderstandings or somebody is shot, and they say it's definitely racism, and the guy wasn't doing anything wrong. The guy who was on drugs and was committing a crime wasn't doing anything wrong. He's a nice family man. He's a student. And the police officer is definitely racist. It's not just the police officer, it's the whole system. We need to change the system, and no police, no jails, socialism. So this is the big con going on of the political agenda, where they use these rare, very rare incidences of excessive police force or misunderstandings. It's going to happen every month. Look, every day you get hundreds of calls to police that say, hey, there's a guy here on drugs, he's high, and he's committing a crime, just like the Jacob Blake case. That was his former girlfriend who he had assaulted sexually a week before or so and had a restraining order on him. And he was there. She said, this guy's on drugs, he's stealing my kids, he's stealing my car, come save me. The police come out, and Jacob Blake says, I'm going to fight the police because he doesn't want to go back to jail. And I didn't like it when the police shot him in the back, but he was going for a knife, I guess. So these situations happen all the time where the police are asked to deal with someone on drugs, who's on probation, who's committing a crime, and they're under severe pressure. And I think every month you're going to get a couple of casualties in these situations. Sometimes the police are killed. And the fact, though, that they then come in and say, the BLM and Crump come in and say, give us $20 million, GoFundMe. It was definitely racism. No investigation. We want to lynch this guy, charge him for murder now. And if the jury doesn't agree, no peace. So this is just a ridiculous, tragic direction that the Democrats and media have done to really, I call it racial scapegoating of America. Trayvon Martin's parents, Sabrina Fulton, the father Tracy Martin, every time he got suspended from school, he was living with Sabrina. He gets suspended for fighting 3 times, and she'd kick him out on the street instead of locking him down and grounding him. She'd kick him out. So he goes 250 miles away, no supervision, and tries to beat up Zimmerman, who eventually, after calling for help, fires a single shot to save his life. So this was parenting deficiency. It had nothing to do with racism. So the Democrat Party, they have a failed agenda, failed policy, 50, 60 years of controlling urban cities in America. Like I show in my film, There's No Place Like Utopia. And often they have black mayors, black police chiefs, and they have terrible education systems, violent cultures, drug cultures, single motherhood, no jobs, high taxes. And instead of saying, okay, these Democrat socialist policies don't really work, they say, okay, we have a racial scapegoat, just like the Martin family had Zimmerman was their racial scapegoat. The racial scapegoat for the failed policies in urban America of the Democrat Party, the racial scapegoat is America. It's because it's all racist. It's the system. Well, where is it? Now they say, Obama liked to say it's in the DNA. It's in the cellular structure. That's how invisible it is. I grew up in Tennessee in the 70s. I never heard the N-word. Black and white kids, we're all friends. We're friends to this day. So they came up with this narrative, in 2012, that all of a sudden everything and everyone is racist. So you better hand over the power, hand over your money, hand over the political system to the Democrat Party because they need a racial scapegoat for the failure of their policies.
I couldn't agree more. And I think if nothing else, your film is so compelling because it does get behind the curtain of these various characters in the film. And the underlying theme, it really just underscores that these failed Democrat policies don't work. I mean, if you look at Trayvon, broken home, father not there, getting bounced back and forth, getting absorbed into the drug culture, into the gang culture, into what is really proliferated in the media and proliferated as being normalized and accepted. And then on the flip side of that coin, you got George Zimmerman, who's actually trying to get out there and make a difference. I don't know if it's a big buddy program or what. He was actually trying to mentor a lot of these folks from a broken home that were victims of these
that didn't
asinine
come.
systems.
You'll see in the film, Zimmerman was a minority advocate. Spanish was his first language, Hispanic kid. And he didn't have any money. He was living in a rental apartment. And he spent his spare time and money mentoring black kids whose parents were in prison. I don't know anybody who has a big enough heart to take their time to do that, especially at his low income level. So he was an Obama supporter, and they, turned him into some kind of white supremacist because they wanted their agenda to succeed. They decided, let's just call an innocent man guilty, and it doesn't matter. And by the way, also not well known that Trayvon was also part of that system and program in Florida where they did not prosecute crimes of minors because they said they wanted to, reduce the school to prison pipeline, and they wanted to, the same as the Parkland shooter. Whenever he committed a crime, they just suspend him or send him home or something instead of going to the juvenile system. So Trayvon needed some intervention. He was very much in pain and going through terrible, troubled times because he'd lived with his stepmother his entire life, named Alicia Stanley. And his father left her, so he had to go back and live with Sabrina, who he'd never lived with. And he was just acting out very badly, dealing drugs, guns, fighting. I think he was just trying to get kicked out of Sabrina's house so he'd go back to live with Alicia. And she even told Anderson Cooper that, Alicia Stanley did. And you'll see in the film very touching information, and you'll see it even in the trailer, that when after Trayvon was shot, he asked George Zimmerman, he said, please tell Mom Alicia I'm sorry, meaning Alicia Stanley, the woman who raised him. So it's a great film, and it really shows you where things turned in America to this ridiculous racial narrative that continues to plague us to this day.
And kind of going back to the cultural element, I mean, going back to Diamond and even her stand-in, I mean, those were both sort of pitiful segments to watch for me because you had the girl on the stand who couldn't even read. And then again, sort of the flip side of that coin, Diamond, the real Diamond, just obsessed with money and power and fame and beauty and just all this nonsense. It's just so sad what the culture has turned into.
Yeah, look, Diamond Eugene was a kind of an obnoxious, self-centered 16-year-old girl into fashion and beauty and clothing. And she actually had a boyfriend at the time. She was two-timing him with Trayvon. And it was kind of a love triangle. And she, did not want to come forward. And I have actually all her phone records and her tweets and text messages as well. And I put the whole story together. It's really kind of, like you said, a whodunit. And she would not come forward. And she was actually coerced. She was harassed by Ben Crump, by Trayvon's father, Tracy Martin, by Trayvon's two gangster friends named Mario Riley and Stephon Bramble. They were hammering her. I got all the text messages, all the phone records, and she refused to say anything. And it was only after she was threatened with exposure by Ben Crump that she agreed to do this phone call. And she's only 16 years old, and you can tell in the phone call, I have the recordings in the movie, she just repeats back to Crump everything he says, yes, and that's how they got Obama, and everyone kind of suckered into it. And then, of course, she was smart enough, though, not to lie to the police. When the police came around, she engineered, I think, with Ben Crump, and then Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon's mother, was in on it, too, to switch her out for Rachel Gentile to pretend to be Trayvon's girlfriend. And as implausible as it would be, everybody just kind of went along with it. And they used her statements in the indictment. If you look at the indictment, it's in the movie against Zimmerman. Rachel Gentile said she heard Trayvon say this, and George Zimmerman say that. And the prosecutors dismissed what the eyewitnesses saw and heard and used what this girl said she heard on the phone. So when you look at it, it's just unbelievable what they got away with and how it ended up harming the country so much that this narrative has grown to today. As I said, when there's an incident, they just say it's definitely racism, and they charge the person with murder within 24 hours, and then the lynch mob doesn't care anyway. They go ahead and riot anyway. So this is how far down the road it's come. And Ben Crump is always involved, and you can see there's like a body count starting in Sanford up till, going through Ferguson, Missouri, and Baltimore, and all these different stops where you'll see a body count wherever Crump goes. The bodies pile up, and the millions pile up with GoFundMe and with multi-million-dollar settlements from these cities. So I had hoped that the Trayvon Hoax film and book would expose this. This was late 2019. I actually held a press conference at the National Press Club. And I guess what was most disappointing is not only did the liberal Democrat affiliated media not show up, but much of the conservatives were afraid to cover it. I had the best connections, believe me, to every single talking head you can think of that works for Fox News, who has a show or is a guest. And I sent them copies of the book and the film, a lot of them to their houses through my connections. And some of them were straight up honest. They said, this is the motherlode of racial cases, and we're just afraid to talk about anything that has to do with race because we'll get hammered on social media. We're just afraid of this. Some of them were honest. Some of them just would never talk to me again, like Larry Elder, a radio show host, very well known and well liked. He actually is one of the few people that called out Rachel Jeantel in 2013 when she appeared in court and said she was lying. And I talked to him about it and said, why don't you have me on your show? We can talk about this. And I sent him a copy of the trailer, and he never talked to me again. I think all these guys have like contracts with Fox News, and they don't want to do anything to disrupt or potentially get in the crosshairs of the left. So had they covered it, Hannity did tweet about it, but he didn't have me on his show. Tucker, I told them, I said, look, after the Democrats finish with this impeachment hoax stuff, they're going to pivot back to the race hoax stuff. And you need to cover this because it shows that BLM is a complete fraud and it doesn't do anything to help black people. You look at their website, it's just a carbon copy of the Weather Underground May 19 communist organization out of the 60s and 70s with this radical liberal socialist agenda. Talks about transgenderism and no police and no jails, this utopia. Nothing to do with helping black people. Never a word about black kids that are killed in these shootings. I can tell you the biggest fans of the Trayvon hoax, the people that love my film the most that I get emails from are black teenagers. They say, oh my God, I grew up with this Trayvon stuff. I was afraid to go out of the house. Or one girl said, I have a black son and I was afraid for him to grow up in America, but now I see we got played. Thank you. Thank you. So they're the ones that suffer from this the most, is this false narrative that there's armed white men in the streets and white supremacists that want to shoot you because they don't like your skin tones. It's the most dumbest, stupidest thing. And the media and the Democrat Party have run with it to this day. The Democrat Party appointed themselves as anti-racism, watchdogs. So everything now is racially oriented. Everything that you fund, racial equality became racial equity. It's all against the very founding principles of what unifies Americans under our Constitution and Bill of Rights, where we're all equal under the law. And that's what Martin Luther King and so many people fought for. And I think the movement got taken over by these radicals. A lot of it is somewhat of a general misunderstanding at first. People say, well, Black Lives Matter. Well, everyone agrees with that. And everyone agrees with anti-racism. But Black Lives Matter is not the second coming of the NAACP or the United Negro College Fund. They are radical Marxists who want to destroy the system. No different from the Weather Underground radicals in the 60s. Same ideology, same playbook.
Yeah, I often say this. They just sort of rebrand and repackage the same old propaganda every 10 years or so. But, they keep using that fear narrative. And to your point, if you look at the mainstream media now, and certainly during the Trayvon hoax, not your film, but the actual events that were going on, the average person would think that we were living in some sort of birth of a nation, sort of Klansmen on horseback riding through the streets, just lynching people, when that was the furthest thing from reality. But they use those divide and conquer mechanisms. They use that fear to control people. And it's just old hat for the Democrats or the communists, as I just affectionately refer to them as.
Look, it's a very evil idea. It's a very evil plan. Starting with the Zimmerman case, let's use the tragic death of this black teenager who was very troubled, whose mother kicked him out on the street, who keeps getting suspended for fighting. And let's put this Hispanic man in jail who's a Obama supporter and advocate for minorities, who screamed for help and eventually fired a shot because he thought he was going to save his life. Let's put this Hispanic kid in prison so we can control the black voters. Very evil idea. But it does go back, as you say, to the entire communist playbook. The communists understood back even in the 30s, they were based in Chicago, where they understood that Americans would never go for this communist socialist nonsense, that we're a free country, free market country, church-going, God-loving people will never go for it. So they figured they had to always present themselves as a different movement. So, for instance, in the 30s, they said they were anti-war. We don't want to go to World War II. We don't want to fight another European war. It was like an anti-war movement, but really they were communists. After the World War II and into the 60s, they were simply anti-Vietnam, or we don't anti-war. Then they were anti-draft. So they were always putting up a different front as to what they really represented. And it took some thinking and a little research to say, wait a minute, these guys are radical Marxists who want to replace the Constitution with the Communist Manifesto. This has nothing to do with an anti-war thing. It was really the early mid-'80s that they started with this anti-racism idea. Now, they did try it in the 30s, actually. They tried in Chicago to inflame races, but the black people in Chicago were church-going people. They didn't want any part of Marxism, which was a war between the classes, because they believed in love thy neighbor. They knew that Marxism was, all about atheism, and they were church-going people. So it didn't work. They came back in the mid-'80s. Really, Obama was in on it. He was brought to Chicago from New York after his Columbia year by Bill Ayers, the terrorist Weather Underground leader, to head up the Developing Communities Project in Chicago. And his job was to be a front man to penetrate the black churches to try to get them to join these socialist groups. So Obama started his political career in this race baiting, representing far-left radical groups. I showed his history, by the way. You've seen my film, Dreams from My Real Father, where I showed that Obama's real biological father was not the Kenyan Obama, was in fact Frank Marshall Davis, was a communist out of Chicago that moved to Hawaii in the 40s on orders of the Soviet Union, as it acted as a Soviet agent, and went to Hawaii to organize the trade unions with the idea of expelling U.S. naval forces from Hawaii. This was before statehood, and taking over the island so that the Russians could expand in Southeast Asia. So this guy was a Soviet agent under FBI surveillance for 20 years. And I make the case, and I think very effectively, that that was the real biological father of Obama, not the Kenyan. But more important, Obama even admits in his own Dreams from My Father biography and elsewhere that he was raised by Frank Marshall Davis. Frank Marshall Davis radicalized him into this communist socialist worldview. So Obama in the 80s was in on it with these radical groups in Chicago, where his father was from. And that anti-racism watchdog idea has really grown till today, where the Democrats just claim to be anti-racism. But when you look underneath that, you can see there's a whole radical agenda that is implemented to destroy American values, the constitutional amendments, and the American middle class. Because the left understood and wrote a lot about this in the 60s, that the capitalist system, the free market system, the Constitution are really supported by the middle class. And they would never go for this socialist nonsense. So they decided that they would destroy the middle class by removing jobs, sending all the factories to Asia, everything they could do to destroy the middle class. And that would create what you see in socialist countries, which is an elite socialist class of elites and then one large lower class. It's a very evil idea.
Yeah, I mean, NAFTA and GATT pretty much put the death knell in most industry in America, it seems.
Well, these trade policies are all part of it.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned when we started the conversation, what was most shocking to me, I did expect a lot of voter fraud by the Democrats, but I really felt that they had exposed themselves so much with the rioting and the radicalism that Trump really helped expose them for what they are. I felt that Trump would win in a huge landslide, and that even no matter amount of voter fraud, it would not overcome Trump's victory margin. I think I was right that he did win in a landslide. I didn't understand or anticipate that 5 Democrat counties would implement so much cheating in so many different ways to overcome that, where Biden, very unpopular politician, and Kamala, even less popular, would somehow get 81 million votes, and then that the court system would completely collapse and would be intimidated such that they would not even hear these voter fraud cases. That I didn't really understand or anticipate. But I think what happened is we saw coming together was big tech, globalists, deep state, Democrats, and other interests, including the Chinese, that realized the second Trump term would be an existential threat to them. So I think they all came together, and probably the judicial system probably manipulated to some extent that they can manipulate people to not even look at this stuff. So this was a huge, devastating event that changed the course of history by putting Biden and Kamala in there essentially for a third Obama term that was completely rejected by the voters in 2016 in electing Trump. And I think that was also rejected again in the actual results of 2020.
That's for sure. I'm going to circle back around to nobody covering this. I guess that's so frustrating. I can't even imagine how frustrating it must be for you. But we live in such a bizarre time. I look at the 1984 quote, paraphrase, rather, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act.
Yeah.
You're telling the truth, but then you can't get the mainstream blue blood Republicans to cover the truth. That's got to be just enraging.
I've had it happen before with Dreams of My Real Father. I had a ton of evidence that everything about Obama's background, he claimed he was this kind of middle of the road guy, with a traditional background. I'm going to obey the Constitution. Marriage is between man and a woman and God. He pretended to be this mainstream candidate, and I made the case that he was in fact a radical from a radical background, and had people understood and knew that his real father was a Soviet agent, he would not be acceptable. And it only went so far, unfortunately. It was seen by millions of people. But I thought this time, look, I'm naming names. Rachel Jeantel, everyone remembers from the trial, she was a fake witness. The real girl was Brittany Diamond Eugene. Here she is in my movie. This is her. Here's all the evidence. I thought if you name names, they wouldn't be able to resist covering it. Now, they tried to avoid it at first, and then Zimmerman filed a lawsuit in Florida on December 5th, 2019, against Rachel Jeantel, Diamond Eugene, the Martin family, and Benjamin Crump, and the state of Florida for civil conspiracy and defamation, false prosecution. And that got worldwide attention. The lawsuit they couldn't resist. So it did get covered. I was on the Today Show, they interviewed me. But, after a couple of days, everybody just kind of moved on. Nobody tried to go interview Rachel Jeantel or tried to interview the Martin family or anybody. They just moved on. So that is disappointing. Now, of course, we saw in the New York Post during the election, New York Post gets a hold of Hunter Biden's laptop, and we find out that Joe Biden was taking 10%, the big guy, 50%. His son was working with the Chinese, that guy, Tony Bobolinsky. Joe Biden is bought and paid for by the Chinese. They don't even mention that his diplomacy center, whatever he has at the University of Pennsylvania, paid for by the Chinese. So you'd think that would have destroyed any Republican candidate. Let's say, hey, you're in business with the Chinese Communist Party. They own you. But because it was a Democrat, the New York Post, they couldn't even get the story, it's taken off of Twitter, Facebook. Everyone came out and said, oh, it's Russian disinformation with no basis whatsoever. So I don't feel as bad, I could say, when even the New York Post had all the evidence of Hunter's hard drive, and somehow that was okay. So it just shows you how corrupt the media is and big tech. And really, we have to look back and say, the fix was in all along. Don't forget that the FBI also had Hunter's hard drive back in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And during the impeachment trial, when this would have been relevant, that, oh yeah, it was appropriate to ask or to mention to the president of the Ukraine, if you see any corruption involving the Biden family, please call the attorney general. That would be very appropriate because there's a mountain of corruption on his hard drive. So, look, I think my stuff does have an effect, but it's more over time. People see it and they learn a lot, but it doesn't have the initial immediate impact you might think it would. I'll give you one funny example. Mike Huckabee, I remember, interviewed me on his radio show for Dreams from My Real Father. It was supposed to be a 20-minute interview. And I think they didn't really prepare him, or he didn't know much about it. And I started explaining, well, I have presented a mountain of evidence that Obama is a radical socialist. His father radicalized him in Hawaii into a Marxist worldview. It's not the Kenyan. That was a cover. And he kind of freaked out and ended the interview. It was just too much information. And I ran into him maybe like a year ago at an event in Los Angeles. And I said, oh, Governor Huckabee, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a filmmaker. I made this film, Dreams from My Real Father. I was on your show once. He said, oh, great movie. I've watched it 6 times. I love it. Thank you for making that. So it just took him time to look at it. And I think it did have an influence on a lot of people. I remember Ron Johnson, Senator Ron Johnson. I ran into him a few years ago. He gave a speech, and I just walked up to him to say, oh, I enjoyed your talk. And I said, I'll introduce myself. He said, you don't have to introduce yourself. I've seen all your movies. He said, I've watched Dreams from My Father, Real Father 10 times. So most people have seen it. I think the Trayvon hoax, people now understand that the media, the judiciary, and the Democrat Party want to push this false racial narrative for their political goals. And they don't care about justice for anything or anybody. It's only for political agenda. And unfortunately, shockingly, we're seeing that play out even as we speak in Minneapolis in the George Floyd trial. Benjamin Crump, he's there every day trying to intimidate the jury. And I can tell you, Derek Chauvin does them no good in prison. And that's why they overcharge him. They overcharge these guys because they know they won't get a conviction. And if he's out on the street, no justice, no peace. You got to change the system. Give us all the power. Give us all the money. Change everything. If Chauvin goes to prison, they'll just go get another case.
That's what I was going to ask you. What do you think the problem is with these, I guess, more mainline people? Are they afraid of the backlash? Is it the big networks pulling their strings saying, no, you're not going to cover Dreams of My Real Father or the Trayvon hoax or what have you? Or is it just that they're afraid of the racial hot potato and that possible backlash, or all three? I don't know.
They're afraid of all that. A lot of it has to do with advertising dollars. I remember a friend of mine took this film, Dreams from My Real Father, and showed it to Roger Ailes in his office at Fox News before it came out. And he said, Joel will come on one of your shows. You don't have to agree with him. Let him talk about it. You can show the videos a little bit. And Roger, my friend said, Roger is just jaw dropped. He watched the whole movie, and he said, this is incredible, but we can't touch this. It's Roger Ailes. Now, a few years before, don't forget, Glenn Beck was #1 on Fox News for a long time. Mm-hmm. And the Media Matters gang and others, they went after Glenn Beck's advertisers, said, oh, he's very mean to President Obama, and he says things that aren't nice, and we're going to boycott your products. So Glenn Beck was let go, #1 show from Fox News, because they couldn't sell advertising. And they have a lot of shareholders, and they have to have profits, So they'll only go so far. The conservative media will only go so far. And they don't want to jeopardize their, Fox News, #1. Why should they go too far if they don't have to? So it comes down to the economics of it and the fear of loss of jobs, loss of profits, loss of advertisers. It's the intimidation factor through social media, through boycotting of advertisers, being accused of things. It's a real mob. It's a lynch mob out there. And they're trying to lynch Derek Chauvin right now. It looked bad to me on that videotape. It looks like excessive force. He probably didn't need to sit on him for more than a minute or two. I watch Cops. If you ever see that TV show, if you fight the police and don't cooperate, they slam you on the ground, they handcuff you, and they sit on you, including on your neck. I see it on Cops every day. I think he did it for too long. But then for them to, that's why we have police review panels. That's why they have insurance. They pay families in these situations. But the political people jump in and say, oh, definitely racism. It's because of the entire system. Let's get rid of the entire Minneapolis Police Department. Let's take all the funding away from all the police in New York City and everywhere else here in LA. And that's going to somehow make this excessive, police action okay. And it's very much a false narrative, and it's so much more destructive to begin with. But unfortunately, the media and their allies just run with these narratives that are never true to begin with. And we're finding out more every day in the Derek Chauvin trial what really happened. How many drugs did he really ingest before this? Was he acting crazy? Was it justified to throw him on the ground? Probably. Was it justified to sit on him till he calmed down? Probably. Was it justified to sit on him for 8 or 9 minutes? Probably not. I can tell you in the Cops TV show, every single person getting arrested says, I can't breathe. And the cops always say, if you can talk, you can breathe. The guy says, I can't breathe. If you can talk, you can breathe. Then they pick him up, put him in a police car. So, every month you're going to have people in this country being arrested, fighting police, and you'll have police sometimes make a bad decision. But what they've done is they've taken these rare incidences and turned them into these massive racial movements for political power that are undermining the entire constitutional arrangement, judicial system, and everything that makes America great.
Yeah, I'd say another big commonality that I keep running into, anything the communists touch, it's kind of all the same thing, but there's no accountability. So, if you look back just from Trayvon's home life to all these different folks in the film, and also just transpose that to these Democrat-run cities and on and on and on, there's no accountability. And the mob is taking over. The tail is wagging the dog, so to speak. The mob says, well, we want justice now, or we're going to burn down your city. So instead of these folks being held accountable for their actions, they're like, we'll give you a safe space to destroy stuff, and we'll clean up after you destroy the city for a while. Have at it. We'll just step back and stand down.
Well, look, just compare how Donald Trump was treated in his press conferences, White House press conferences.
Yeah.
Anything he would say that was slightly offbeat, they would exaggerate anything he said in a completely different context. Sometimes they'd make up things like the Charlottesville thing. They would take what he said for the first 3 sentences and leave out the 4th sentence. And they go with that and create these narratives. Every single thing he said was just massively exaggerated or misconstrued. Joe Biden holds a press conference. He says bizarre things. He says insulting things. He says whacked out things. He says things that are blatant lies. They don't never hear a word. Hunter Biden, it's a private matter. It's a private matter that he's in with the Chinese and the Ukrainians, and he's getting paid off, and he's on drugs, and
the laptop.
He's probably compromised, and Joe is getting 10%. Oh, that's a private family matter. So it's everywhere. The media, and now, unfortunately, judicial system will protect Democrats, FBI, deep state. They prosecuted Roger Stone for making maybe 1 or 2 misstatements when he was doing an 8 or 10 hour congressional hearing voluntarily. And he said a couple of things that might not have been correct. He gets, his house gets raided by the FBI and everything but a tank. And of course, Andrew McCabe lying to investigators, other people lying to Congress, nothing. So the erosion of the justice system at the highest level, Supreme Court refused to look at voter fraud. It's really shows how corrupt and what danger we are in, and how our rights have been manipulated. And they are willing to manipulate, an Obama supporter, George Zimmerman, or a black teen, Trayvon Martin, use him for their goals. These are very ruthless people that are interested in power and money and they really don't care what stands in their way.
That's the truth. I mean, this one might be out of your purview, but what do you think we could do about getting the judiciary back under control? Because, I mean, they're going after folks. They were on the Capitol ground somewhere. We saw them on this camera, but we can't figure out who's burning the city down and attacking the Capitol of Portland or any other number of things, you know?
What they do is they overcharge everybody to support their media narrative. It's like CNN theater. They have this media narrative that goes on for a few weeks or a few months. And then a year or so later, just like in the Zimmerman case or George Floyd case or other cases, once you really investigate it or the judiciary gets a hold of it, this stuff is usually, a lot of it is dismissed and people are found innocent on the lower level. But it doesn't matter because they're just on to their next narrative, you know, with the next incident. So the FBI being part and parcel of the Democrat narrative machine and supporting the political actors, very, very dangerous. It is supposed to be a neutral arbiter of the law. And instead it's become, you know, a corrupt arm of the activist Democrat Party. The DOJ, for instance, J. Christian Adams wrote about back in 2011. He was a holdover from the Bush administration working for Eric Holder's Obama administration. He told me that they had DOJ of Eric Holder hired 1,000 activist attorneys from La Raza, which is a radical Marxist Hispanic organization called The Race, La Raza, and also from the SPLC. So they hire these radical lawyers and they turn the Justice Department basically into a social justice radical group funded by billions of your tax dollars. If you look at the new stimulus by 1.9 trillion or whatever it is, 3.9, I can't remember now, but there's been so many of them, but they've got 10 billion for climate change organizing. So 10 billion to create a permanent climate army. We're going to fund all these radical groups to bring these radical ideas. And it's all funded by us. So how do we turn around the judiciary? I don't know. I mean, I suspect that in today's world where it's been written about that there's a connection between the deep state, FBI, and big tech. So that helps them go around the laws that protect us from overreach, Fourth Amendment of the government. They can just hand over any email you write, website you visit, text message, phone call. They can just hand it over to the government. So you can imagine what a powerful tool that would be if you want a judge to rule a certain way. You'd know everything about them. So that's just an incredible amount of power that you can have over individuals. A lot of people, this kind of flew under the radar. You might have known about this, that Amazon was a break-even company. Jeff Bezos, they were a break-even company up until about 2013, just breaking even, trying to get more market share. 2013, they got a no-bid contract from the CIA for $600 million to build some websites for them. That was illegal. IBM actually sued the CIA because that was illegal to give a no-bid contract. So Jeff Bezos gets $600 million in cash from the CIA, and the next day he turns around and buys the Washington Post for $250 million. After that, Amazon takes off, becomes profitable. So now Amazon builds and controls a lot of the servers in the country. That's how they got rid of Parler so quickly, because they control the servers. So if you look at the connection now between big tech, Amazon, CIA, information, it doesn't look good to find a way to turn this around.
I touched on this before, but I don't know which really came first, the chicken or the egg, or if it's art imitating life or life imitating art. But so much of what we see is what I just say is intentionally defined reality now. That they're defining our reality based on the movies and the music and what the narratives allow to be in the media and everything else. So, I mean, it's kind of that perfect propaganda mill where if that's all you see, kind of like that horse with the blinders on or that Plato's allegory of the cave, I mean, that's all the average person knows. So that's all they think is real.
It does make your head spin how in the early days of the internet, we were told and we felt that this just opened everything up. Anyone can have a voice. Anybody can start a business and make money. on the internet. Anybody can have a channel, that this would just be so wide open, and it would diminish the power of the corporate media, and it would make voices like you and me heard even more. And what happened over time is the entire internet is controlled. I think all the profits are about 70%, just a few companies. People getting deplatformed if you don't follow their political views. They've actually turned it into a tool of the large corporations and the government and the state media, the state, narratives. Tell you a funny story is I visited the Soviet Union when I was a student, and I visited dissidents who were trying to leave the Soviet Union, and they were telling me, which was obvious, that the state-run media, Pravda, the Soviet propaganda channel, was all lies. And we were watching the TV. He was translating the Russian. He says, lies, lies, lies. And I said, oh, incredible. And then he picked up a copy of Pravda, the newspaper Pravda, and he started reading it. And I said, why are you reading Pravda? You just told me that everything is a lie. He said, well, the way we find out the truth is we read Pravda because we know whatever we read, the opposite is true. And that's how we get our news. I said, oh, wow, I get it. So we're almost in that situation here where if you turn on CNN, it's almost like living under Soviet occupation. They give you this narrative that is just so far-fetched and ridiculous. They ask someone a question and say, there's the big lie that there was voter fraud in the election, and people are pushing this big lie. Why do you think they're lying? And it really feels like that Soviet-run media. So the way to know what's really true is whatever CNN says, whatever the opposite, that's what's really true.
Yeah, I've often kind of compared it to Bizarro World. it's like everything is just inverted. Nothing
backwards
is
world,
real, but it was not.
Everything is backwards. That's what it was like in the Soviet Union when I visited at that time. Everything is backwards. Everything. Walk around the streets, nobody smiles, nobody talks to each other. You go in a grocery store, there was just a pile of, in one corner there's a pile of potatoes on the floor, another corner there's a pile of cheese, another corner is a pile of bread. And there were people lined up for hours just to get in to get this stuff. And then they had a store called the Berioska, which was a store for Communist Party officials. And also, if you're a tourist and you had dollars, you could get in with a passport. And it was like going into Safeway, or it's just completely stocked. So you end up in this socialist system with an elite class that controls and enjoys all of the assets of the state, and then you have the one giant lower class that are barely surviving.
I mean, I hate to say it, but back to your point from the very beginning, I think that's exactly their end game. They want this sort of Hunger Game, us versus them, the very poor versus the very elite. It's every dystopian novel and film kind of rolled into one. I think that's the game plan here.
Well, the Obama people, try to remember where we were in the second term of Obama. Unemployment, 30, 40%, almost everywhere. They claimed it was 10 or 15, but it was much more. ISIS all over the Middle East. Russia was, taking over Crimea and threatening Ukraine, the Chinese. The whole international situation was terrible. And domestically, we were in a terrible economic funk, racial division. This is where Biden, Harris, or whatever handlers controlling them, this is where we're headed. So I think the only hope is if the Republicans can somehow overcome this H.R. 1 for the People Act. They're trying to institutionalize voter fraud, and they have to take back control of the electoral system, and I think there'll be an easy landslide back for Republicans. But as you can see, the Democrats have enlisted corporate woke America like Coca-Cola. They're trying to pressure the MLB to move the All-Star game out of Georgia just because the Georgia legislature decided, wait a minute, we should not have agreed with Stacey Abrams to change all the election integrity laws. It was a mess. And so they're putting full pressure to change the election laws to really create a one-party state. And they're well on their way to doing that, unfortunately.
It certainly sounds like it. Do you hold much hope in this thing turning around? I got to say, I get downtrodden on this whole thing. I just go to like, hey, I think we're kind of just heading for a big.
I'm going to stay optimistic because there's the real spirit of America, the real brotherhood of America. I think Trump exposed all these people, and no one believes most of this stuff. All the efforts to divide people, I think in the end, people do know better. And don't forget, during Obama's years, he was a very charismatic figure. People, for whatever reason, loved him. First black president. He had a lot of people were emotionally attached to him. So, for instance, in the IRS scandal, they were using the IRS to put down the Tea Party movement, illegal criminal actions by the IRS. So Obama came out and said, no one should ever be persecuted for their political belief. This was a mistake. It shouldn't happen. Or the disaster of Obamacare, he would come out and say, well, I guess I oversold it. And people kind of forgive him for everything because they liked him. The Biden-Harris duo, they don't have a popular figure. Nobody likes or cares about either one of them. I think when they do YouTube chats or press conferences, it's like 500 people log on. Nobody cares about them. So I think they're operating in a much more difficult situation where there is no charismatic leader to paper over this radical mess. And I think we're headed for a big mess, but I really do believe in the strength of the American spirit and American values. And I think as we overcame 8 years of Obama trying to divide the country, change history and all the other leftist nonsense, I think we will overcome this.
And do you have any parting words for the audience today before you go?
Yeah, definitely got to see all my films. Start with There's No Place Like Utopia. You can get the DVD, or it's also on Amazon Prime. Probably the funniest film you'll ever see is Trump, the Art of the Insult, about the 2016 campaign. It's just hilarious. You learn a lot about Trump's marketing and branding. Amazing, really, what he went through in 2016. Of course, Dreams of My Real Father, and you get the Trayvon Hoax DVD or the book on Amazon, and the TrayvonHoax.com. And my main website is Highway61ENT for entertainment. So Highway61ENT.com. You can see all my films are listed there. All my films are also on demand. I'm on Twitter, Joel S, initial S, Gilbert. On Twitter, you'll also see the link to all the on-demand films. And put together, I think, a number of films that show what we've gone through in the past 12 or so years with this, how the Democrat Party's become radicalized, how they've joined with the media and have this anti-racism ideology that have somehow taken over the whole country. And I think understanding it is the first step. So please check out all my films.
Indeed. Well, if you'll stick around for a moment, I'll say goodbye to you off the air.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Today. I'll close up here. Well, folks, if you missed any of that, fear not. You can check it out at anomicage.com. I'll have all of Joel's links, the video and the audio from today's show, as well as all the past guests available at anomicage.com. As I always say, you can't do everything, but you can do something. So get out there and do your part and make that difference. Until next time, be safe out there, and I'll be seeing you sooner than later in the Anomic Age.
Thank you for listening to The Anomic Age, a John Age project. For past shows, further info, and to comment, go to anomicage.com. That's ANOMICAGE.com. Till next time, thank you for listening to The Anomic Age.